Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Here at Colonial Williamsburg, preparations are underway for the holidays. Like so many of us, some of my fondest memories are centered around holiday foods. Now, we can certainly have what we consider to be holiday dishes any time of the year, but they seem to taste extra special during this festive season. Today, we're going to explore 3 different but delicious takes on preparing a holiday staple, the apple. And I'll show you a nifty little gadget to put on your gift list that makes the work that much easier. We'll look at the use of herbs in holiday cooking as we prepare an easy soup recipe that will keep you warm and cozy during those cold winter nights. We'll see how pecans are harvested, and then we'll move into the kitchen to show you one of my favorite ways of preparing them. It's a breeze. And finally, for the young and the young at heart, we'll mix up a batch of a childhood favorite, popcorn balls. So stick around. Apple trees were an important part of the colonial landscape. Trees and orchards such as these can be found throughout colonial Williamsburg. The first apple trees were brought here by the first colonists. And today, here at holiday time, you can see that these trees have been picked bare. Of course, today we don't have to have an orchard or even an apple tree to enjoy the delicious taste of apples in our holiday desserts. It seems to me that fruits and vegetables harvested and eaten in their own season taste better. There's nothing more delicious than peaches in summer as well as berries. And for fall, of course, there are apples. This year, the USDA figures that growers produced over 255 million bushels of apples. Many of these come to us this time of year in the form of fruit baskets and through these fancy catalogs. I like them any way I can eat them, but the simpler the recipe, the better. This recipe for apple crumble is quick and easy, and it makes the most of great cooking apples, like Braeburn's and the old standby Granny Smith. When it comes to peeling apples, my life has been made much simpler by this handy little peeler. At the base of this peeler is a vacuum lock, which will allow it to attach to any smooth surface. I like to use a tray like this because it will catch the peels and juice. It's just a matter of locking it down. Now, I just take an apple and put it on the skewer like this and begin to crank. This is really efficient because it only removes the skin and not the meat of the apple. Not only is it peeling it, it also cores it as it goes. With this, it takes no time to come up with the 6 to 7 cups of peeled and cored apples for this recipe. To these apples, I'm adding 3/4 of a cup of sugar and a little lemon juice and pouring them into a greased 7x11 baking dish. The nice thing about this recipe is you don't have to pre-cook the apples. Now for the crumble. It's just simply a mixture of dry ingredients that you spread over the top. Just combine 1 cup of oats to 1 cup of flour and 1/3 cup of granulated sugar with 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Next, add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice to taste. To make the crumble, just add a stick of butter and chop it up into bits about the size of a pea. Now just spread the crumble over the apples and bake it at 375 for about 45 minutes, and you're in for a treat. really enjoy the simple, classic desserts, and especially those that are made from fruit that's fresh and in season, like these Granny Smith apples. So I'm making a French apple tart. It's a time-honored French dessert, and I'm adding a few cranberries for a new twist on this old favorite. This recipe takes 6 large cooking apples that have been peeled, cored, and quartered lengthwise. Now I'll melt 1 stick of unsalted butter in a large iron skillet with 1 cup of sugar. Then arrange the apples in a ring around the pan with the edges turned down and cook them on the burner at a very high heat for 10 to 12 minutes. Checking them often to make sure they're not burning on the bottom. By then the juices should be a rich golden brown. I'll remove this from the heat and turn each slice over and cook the apples another 5 minutes, again on a high heat. Now I'll sprinkle a cup of fresh cranberries over the top and cover it with a thick pastry crust. I found that doubling up pre-made pastry crust works really well. Now you'll want to let the pan cool for a while before you tuck the edges of the crust around the sides. Bake this for about 35 minutes in a preheated 375-degree oven until the crust is golden brown. When it has cooled for about 10 minutes, cut around the perimeter with a knife and flip the tart over onto a serving plate. Now you may have to rearrange some of the fruit. Just look at this beautiful and tasty dessert. It's out of this world, served with fresh whipped cream and a good cup of coffee. For me, the only thing better than those delicious meals from all of that holiday cooking is the leftovers. Somehow roasted turkey tastes even better in a sandwich than it does when it's served as a main course, particularly when it's combined with a great tasting chutney. Chutney is simply a relish made from fruit, spices, and herbs. This recipe for cranberry apple chutney makes the most of 2 of the season's shining stars, cranberries and apples. The recipe is simple. We'll start with the fruit first. Combine 3½ cups of fresh cranberries, 1 tart apple, like a Granny Smith, finely chopped, 2 oranges, the wedges of one and the juice of the other, 1/2 cup of golden raisins, and 1 chopped medium yellow onion. The nice thing about this recipe is that you can combine everything in one saucepan. Now with the body of the chutney in place, I'm ready to add the sugar and spices. Start with 1 cup of brown sugar, and then 1/4 teaspoon of each of the following spices: cloves, ginger, allspice, and white pepper, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Let this come to a boil, stirring often for about 20 minutes. After this cools, I'll keep it in the refrigerator, and when served on a sourdough roll or bread with roast turkey, the flavor is out of this world. Remember, all of these recipes can be found on our website. That's palensmith.com. Not everyone in 18th century Williamsburg grew their own vegetables. Many homeowners with small gardens grew just enough herbs to season their favorite foods throughout the year. Now today, you can look around and the herb gardens here look great even in the middle of winter.
You know, in the last few years at Colonial Williamsburg, I found more and more people on the garden tours are interested in the gardens. And you can tell just by the questions that they're asking. They want to know what the plants are. because a lot of the plants in the historic area are native, and they're not used to seeing natives because of all the exotics that have been introduced. So it's obvious people really do enjoy gardens and enjoy coming here for the gardens.
Any time of year. I mean, here we are in December and the
Right.
gardens look great.
That's right, and that's what a lot of people think, that although there's not a lot of color, the structure and the design of these gardens are so strong because of their Dutch English influence that there's always something to see in the gardens. Rosemary is one of our favorites, and I'm sure you're familiar with the smell, how great it is.
Oh yeah, nice clean.
Christmassy smell.
Yeah, Christmassy
yeah.
smell, pine, almost pine-like.
And it grows great here.
Another popular herb here is basil, and it's a key ingredient in one of my favorite winter recipes. When the temperature drops and the days become shorter, few things taste as good to me as hot homemade soup, particularly when I've been working outside. A few years ago, a friend gave me the recipe from a famous French restaurant for a robust tomato soup, and it's the best I've ever had. It starts with fresh tomatoes, if you can find some with good flavor. Just peel and dice enough to make 4 cups. If you don't have fresh, you may use canned. Pour the tomatoes into a large saucepan along with 4 cups of tomato juice and let this simmer for about 30 minutes. Now for a little flavor boost. One of my favorite herbs to use with tomatoes is basil, so it just makes good sense to use it in tomato soup. Now, one of the easiest ways I've found to preserve or store basil is to chop it and freeze it in ice trays in the form of little cubes like this. It's a great way to take the flavor of summer well into the winter. Seasoning those soups and stews with fresh herbs can be simple any time of the year. Just chop the leaves of your favorite herbs, such as basil or Italian parsley, and put 1 teaspoon into each cube of an ice tray. Then when you want to add the fresh taste of herbs to your favorite soup recipe, just pop in a few of these pre-measured cubes and let the flavor melt in. This recipe calls for 12 leaves, so I'm going to use 4 of these cubes. I just drop them into the cooked tomatoes and let them melt. Then I pour the tomatoes and basil into a blender and blend them until they're smooth. Then I return the mixture to the pan and add 1 stick of unsalted butter, 1 cup of whipping cream, and about 1/4 of a teaspoon of cracked pepper and salt to taste. Now I'll just heat this through and it'll be ready in a few minutes. With the cream and butter, it's certainly not low-cal, but hey, we've got to live a little. Now not only will this warm you up on a cold day, it's ideal for serving around the holidays. Be sure to look for these recipes on our website. That's palensmith.com. It's interesting how our perceptions and attitudes about food have changed over the centuries. For instance, during colonial times, that great American native nut, the pecan, was actually used as food for hogs. Obviously, those first colonists never had a taste of one of my grandmother's pecan pies. Before those pecans become a holiday snack, of course, they have to be harvested and brought to the grocery store. There's something serene and majestic about trees of any kind, but a grove of trees planted in orderly rows like these is particularly appealing to me. Now, this is a young grove, but the pattern or layout used here has been used for thousands of years. Now these are pecan trees, and they're just beginning a long life of production. When this tree was just 6 or 7 years old, it produced only a handful of pecans, but by the time it's, say, 60 to 70 years old, it will produce up to 300 pounds of pecans in a year. In late fall and early winter, the nuts are gathered from the ground, but sometimes they need a little help getting there, so the trees are given a jolt. The nuts can be harvested by picking them up by hand, but large commercial operations use these pecan harvesters. They can gather up to 500 to 600 pounds of these in an hour. Shelling a lot of pecans can be a big job and time-consuming, but but luckily these days there are places equipped to handle the work more efficiently. This pecan cracker breaks the nut, and the sheller removes most of the shell, leaving the pecan halves intact. It seems that the pecan has become even more popular these days across the country with chefs. They use them in salads, entrees, and especially desserts. If you're like me, this time of year you're probably having more friends and relatives around. It's always nice to have on hand something to munch on. Over the years I've found that my toasted pecans always get a big response. This is the season when pecans, like so many other nuts, are most plentiful. If you don't have much time and you want something tasty, this recipe can be thrown together in a hurry, and it works equally well with almonds. Start by pouring 4 cups of pecan halves in a large baking pan, spreading them out evenly. Then melt ½ cup of butter or margarine in a saucepan and add 4 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce, 1 tablespoon of garlic salt, and for a little zip, 1/2 teaspoon of Tabasco sauce. Stir the liquid mixture and drizzle it over the nuts. Now I'm stirring them just a little to make sure they're completely coated. Then I'll put them in the oven for 30 minutes at 300 degrees, and I'll stir them periodically to make sure they toast uniformly. Now I just pour them onto some paper towels so that any excess butter can be absorbed. Once they've cooled, you can keep them fresh by storing them in an airtight container. I think these are a nice alternative to all of the sweets we have around this time of year. And the way I see it, if you have to go nuts during the holidays, this is the best way to do it. For these and other recipes, check out our website, theallensmith.com. We're also rushed during the holidays. It's nice to have an evening at home. Watching a movie and enjoying an old-fashioned treat like popcorn is a good way to relax. Today, Americans consume over 17.3 billion quarts of popcorn. That's an average of 68 quarts for each of us. There's no telling how many ears of corn that takes. Popcorn is one of those simple gifts from the garden that can't be improved upon unless it's spun into the form of popcorn balls. They're a treat for all ages. Now with the popcorn ready, I'm going to start making the syrup, which gives it great flavor and holds all the corn together. In a large saucepan, combine 1 cup of sugar with 1/3 cup of corn syrup, 1/2 cup of water, and 1/4 cup of butter, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now I've cooked this, stirring constantly until all of the sugar is dissolved. Now I'm going to stop stirring and let it continue to cook until it reaches a temperature of 270, or until the syrup forms a ball when dropped into cold water. Then add 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla for a little added flavor. Now just pour this over the 3 quarts of salted popped corn and mix it together. After you've greased your hands with butter, just shape them into balls. Once you pour the syrup in, you need to work fast because it will harden. Now these will last up to 2 weeks in Ziploc bags, but around here they evaporate long before that. I think the most important thing to keep in mind when preparing for the holidays is something I try to do throughout the year. Keep it simple and uncomplicated. Don't let yourself get caught up in all the stress that can sometimes be a part of this time of year. Just kick back, relax, and enjoy the company of friends and family. The recipes in today's show were designed to be simple and easy in the hope that they would enhance, not take away from your holiday season. Give them a try. You'll be glad you did. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.